Welcome to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk.
Hey everyone, it's Jenny Lisk, and this is episode 140 of the Widowed Parent Podcast. So I had such a great discussion with Chris Buchanan for this episode. And Chris has written a graphic novel for grieving teens and kids, which is something that really is unique among the grief literature. There are lots of picture books for small children. There are lots of memoirs and terrific nonfiction books for adults and even some teens. But graphic novels really are unique, and she was inspired to write this book because of a death in her community, which I will let her tell you about. And she brought her many years of expertise as a speech-language pathologist to this task of writing this book in order to create a different type of resource for parents and for professionals who are working with grieving kids and teens. So before we jump into my discussion with Chris, I want to let you guys know some news from here. First of all, my second book, which is called Widowed Parents Unite, 52 Tips to Get Through the First Year from One Widowed Parent to Another, is coming out on August 29th. So I'm not going to be officially announcing this until early August. You won't see anything about it on socials until then. So if you are listening now, then you are among the first to know the news. And Widowed Parents Unite is actually a collection of tips from one widowed parent to another, and there are 48 other widowed moms and dads across the U.S. and also some outside the U.S. who have all jumped in to share their best advice with you, the reader. So I hope you will keep an eye out for that. Again, it's coming August 29th, but that is not officially announced yet, so keep a lookout for that soon. And secondly, I'm going to have actually another exciting announcement in early August, along with this announcement about Widowed Parents Unite. I can't share what this one is for now. For now, I will just say that we are going to have a whole bunch more resources coming very soon for widowed parents. So stay tuned. You'll want to make sure you're following me at LiskJenny, LiskJenny, on Instagram and all the other socials so you don't miss the announcement. All right, that's all the news from here. Let's get on with the show. Support for this podcast comes from BetterHelp. You can talk with a licensed professional therapist online, anytime, anywhere. Visit betterhelp.com/widowedparent to learn more and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/widowedparent. I hope you'll check it out. My guest today is Chris Buchanan. Chris is a nationally certified speech-language pathologist in private practice, and she's been helping children and teenagers with special needs connect with their friends and families for over 22 years. She knows what kids love and is passionate about creating books that all children, including children with special needs and all abilities, can access to enjoy life and reach ever higher. Speaking of books, Chris is the author of the brand new graphic novel, R.I.P. Corey, My Friend Died, and It Sucks. She's joining us today from Federal Way, Washington. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I've really been looking forward to this. And I should say, you're kind of just down the road from me here. We really should just hop into the car and meet up at Starbucks or something.
Yeah, we could have done this in person.
I know. It's always great to talk to someone who's close by here. So I think what you've done here is really unique and interesting. I can't wait to talk to you about it. It's a graphic novel for grieving kids, right?
Right. Yeah. Middle school, high school, even 8 years and up, probably. I tried to keep it pretty simple in terms of content because, grief is complex and as enough,
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have a lot of other storylines happening, like gang violence or any other things happening. So that way, I've been in critique groups and I've had people say, yeah, their 8-year-old, they would like to kind of have it because, grandma's getting up there. And so I think it could work for 8 all the way up to through high school, especially if you have adults with special needs. I have had people say that they have friends in the adult family care homes. And a lot of those people don't read very much or very well. So this book would be perfect, to deal with the loss that they're experiencing.
I see. Okay. And just to kind of get everybody on the same page here, No pun intended, actually. Graphic novel. So this is not a children's picture book. It's different. Can you just what is a graphic novel?
Graphic novels are like comic books, except comic books get released serially, like one a week or one a month, chapter 5, chapter 6, whereas a graphic novel is complete in and of itself. So it is a comic book, like it's a story told in pictures and possibly words. I just found a graphic novel, I think it's called Isla to Island, and it's all pictures. There's only 2 words or 3 at the very toward the end. So okay. So basically graphic novels, they've got all the pictures and speech bubbles and thought balloons, and mine added in a little bit of journal in the center of it, so we get to see the main character's journal writing. Gotcha. So you have a lot of freedom to do all kinds of stuff with a graphic novel.
Right. Okay. And it's different from a children's picture book in that it's not aimed at that little kid set, the kindergartners and the preschoolers.
Right. Gotcha. It's not like a grown-up reading to them. This is the reader reading it to themselves and gotcha. Maybe showing it to other people like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm feeling too. So
Okay. And the main character, I think, in the book is high school age. So can you tell us, where did you get the idea for this book?
Well, it's based on a real story because I knew Corey. He lived here in Federal Way and he died in 2018.
And he was a young person?
He was 23 years old when he died. And I was friends with his mom for a really long time. And she's given her blessing to this book. She's just so excited that sort of like he's still with us in a way and he can help a lot of people, she's hoping. So she'll be at the book signing soon. So
good.
Yeah. And we got interviewed by the local paper because he's a local guy. So he was 23 when he passed away. So a lot of people here in town knew him. In fact, there was a Facebook group encouraging him to get well. And that had over like 150 people sending all these great videos and messages, get well soon, for about 2 months while he was in the hospital here. He had some sort of an infection. And because he was perfectly healthy beforehand. So it was very unexpected. And then, of course, then when someone had to give the news on the Facebook group that he passed away, because he was in the ICU, so nobody could go visit him. Okay. And not nobody. I was allowed to stop by and visit him almost every day on the way home from work. So then they were all upset on the Facebook page, of course. So I kind of got to witness all of that. And I was just like, oh my gosh, how are these guys going to deal with this? A lot of them were in Special Olympics and, had been in plays with Corey. And I just thought some of these kids, I don't think have a lot of communication skills, verbal, like they might be nonverbal. And how are they going to talk to their parents about how awful this was and what they're going through? I mean, even me as a 55-year-old, I was like, did this just happen? I mean, and I would just tell everyone who would listen the story. Oh my gosh, he was fine. And then, I forgot what your question.
That's okay. No, my question was how you got the idea for this.
So I wanted to help them. It's actually for them. In fact, I just shared on the Facebook group today, the book is done and everybody's getting pretty excited. And so I'm hoping to see some of them when we have our little book launch party. So
awesome. Good. And so it sounds like, you have this personal experience and the loss. He was your friend, young friend. And then you were seeing these other young people in this group. And then you have a background yourself as a speech pathologist. So how does that come into play here? I guess, maybe you could tell us a little bit about speech pathology. Because I know a lot of people, myself, I think included, experiences with speech pathology have mostly consisted of having a small child who's having trouble with their, I think you call it articulation, maybe, pronouncing words. Yeah. And they go and they work on learning how to pronounce words. And I think speech therapy encompasses many more things than that.
Oh, yeah. It's way bigger. It's language. It's like language that we communicate with. Okay. So, and that's actually the bigger part of what I do and the part I really love. Fixing a lisp or an R is not super fulfilling to me. I want people to be successful, but we know what they're saying with their lisp and their R. What's more exciting are the it's language. So if you picture kids who are not understanding at their grade level of speaking and understanding. So people often who have autism, they're not really, if they're 8, they're not communicating like most 8-year-olds usually. And they need speech therapy to learn how to request what they want, explain what just happened. That's verbal expression. And that also translates into written expression. They usually have difficulty writing and reading.
Okay.
So a lot of the kids I see, and not just autism, there's such a thing as language disorder, developmental delay. Kids are we have no explanation for why it is, like Down syndrome, they have delay, or cerebral palsy, have difficulties. So there's no real medical thing that happened that caused it. They're just like about 1 in 10 kids, I think, is just sort of language doesn't really come automatically to them. So they start falling behind. And then they get to kindergarten and we're starting in on the reading and they're already not even speaking. And so they need help. And they're usually the ones you find in like special ed classrooms or programs, because we're just getting them caught up. They're just like on a little bit later schedule, or they just communicate a little differently. So by doing that, a big complex topic like death is hard for them to understand. And then I would see parents explaining to them, even like stranger danger, or that's not safe. And the kid has this blank look on their face like, okay, you're telling me it's not safe. I have no idea what safe means. Because they don't have a deep understanding of language, like a mature understanding of it, even an age level understanding of it. So we need to say things flat out, straight up, which is with death. You can often upset people, like parents. They'll be like, he's no longer with us. And you're like, look, he died. And the kids always then have a ton of questions. What happened? That's what they always ask me. Every kid I've shared this book with, what is it? The first thing, is this a real story? Is this true? And then what happened? And I say, it is an infection. I don't really know. And anyway, it was, in the book, it says he couldn't stop throwing up. And so then I had one girl go, must have been an infection in his stomach. And I'm like, yes, that's inference. We need the kids doing this. But yeah. So anyway, we need to flat out say what's going on in the shortest, simplest words. I am afraid you will get hit by a car and it will make you bleeding if I let you run out in the parking lot like this. Not just don't go there. It's not safe. Hold my hand. But we don't really tell them why. So anyway, so that's when I thought of these kids and like, how are their families talking to them about what just happened and grief and how they're going to get through this, and missing Corey. And you're going to want to talk about that quite often. And I think sometimes parents don't want to upset the kids, so they don't bring it up. And even the kid, I say kid, but it could be a 23-year-old who, thinks more like a 12-year-old. I don't want to, and they don't want to upset their parents. So a lot of probably not communicating goes on.
Right.
So as a communication specialist, that drives me crazy.
You're like, okay, we need to do something here.
And then when I started researching about grief and stuff, I'm like, the number one thing is you're supposed to talk about it.
Right.
So I thought, maybe I could help them talk about it.
Okay. So this book then, it sounds like could be a vehicle for children, teenagers to talk about it, to think about it, I guess, themselves, and then hopefully to take some steps of talking to some of the adults or other people in their lives. Correct.
Exactly. It could be used for both. And what I'm hoping is it'll lead to both. I put questions in there without answers, like in the journal, that I'm hoping they can relate to. Like, I have that question too. And they try to answer it, because I don't really want to feed them answers. I don't know what happens after we die. Who am I to say? But obviously they're questioning it and wondering. Sure. And so even a nonverbal adult, like 23, could show their person who comes or who helps them, like they could point to that part in the journal and be like, look, like they'll probably adamantly point at it. And then the parent or a family member will go, are you thinking about, grandpa who died? I know. Are you wondering this too? Because there's also pictures, so they don't even have to be able to read, like, where are you? There's like pictures with question marks in it. face up in the clouds. Like, where are you?
Mm.
And then they could maybe start talking about, I don't know where he is either. Where do you think he could be? And we could draw pictures of where we think he is.
Mm.
So we're facilitating communicating.
Gotcha. And
so they can heal, so they can integrate it into their, so we have to talk about it like bare bones, almost like you would talk to a 4-year-old about it, so that it's understood and not over their heads,
Gotcha. Okay. And it sounds like you're in the book more facilitating discussion and opening lines of inquiry than like explaining.
Correct. I don't give a lot of answers. It's not actually full of answers.
Right.
It's full of questions, which I don't know. I think a lot of people could relate to, because there are a lot of guesses and a lot of beliefs as to what happens and what we should do and everything, but it's kind of all up for discussion. I mean, the idea is to get into their brain and help them process this. And if we're not finding out what's going on in their brain, I think they're going to feel really alone, which is why I put that quote in the back by Brene Brown. It says, the more difficult it is for us to articulate our experiences of loss, longing, and feeling lost to the people around us, the more disconnected and alone we feel. And then I have seen on websites where that type of thing can lead to the behaviors, it's not bad grief. I forget what they call it. This way where the grief is kind of stuck, and they could do self-harm and addiction type behaviors because it didn't get processed. There's a word for that type of grief, complicated grief.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
Like unresolved, didn't get talked about or processed.
And speaking of kids of different abilities, I think that I saw somewhere that the reading level is more like a first and second grade kind of reading level in terms of the words and stuff.
That's true. I mean, it's pretty simple words. Was that really you in my dream last night? That's all the words on one page, and then it's pictures.
Gotcha.
And the whole point of graphic novels, actually, any librarian or reading teacher would tell you, is like it helps these struggling readers and reluctant readers because they can understand what's going on from the pictures, because they can't from the words yet.
Gotcha.
They're getting there, and we need to let them have these graphic novels to like bring them on, to make them love reading. Because if I open a book of 200 pages of pure text,
right,
I'm not enjoying it.
Down. Right,
I'm going to put it right down if I'm a reluctant reader or if I'm overwhelmed from grief. I mean, I saw a review from a woman who was like, I don't have time for all this reading. I just need a quick, graphic novel.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting point. And actually, I hear from a lot of people on this topic, and it feels like people fall into two camps. Either they're like, oh my God, give me every book. I want to read them all. Or they're like, I can't sit down and focus on a paragraph, much less a whole book. Even if maybe they loved reading before. It's something about that grief brain thing, right? And it's overwhelming and it's, But
so I'm a slow reader. I can't stand reading. I see a book with a lot of text and my stomach turns. So I get what a lot of my clients, I would say 90% of my clients, books are almost not accessible to them, especially, and that's how I came to this book, is because I went to the library and bookstores to find books, and it was children's books about animals dying, or leaf the stage cycle of a leaf, or what was the one, or like 200 pages of text. And even if a high schooler could read 200 pages of text, if you hand that book to them at a moment where they're grieving, I'm really not sure they're gonna. I think, like my daughter said, I just going to toss someone aside. So anyway.
Well, not to mention the fact that high schooler probably has hundreds of pages of other things to read for all their classes and all their schoolwork.
They have to read. Exactly. That's kind of why I think graphic novels are so popular.
Right.
And they tackle these serious topics. There's one called The Long Way Down, which is pretty famous right now. And it's, about a shooting in like Chicago, I think. And, kids just love them. I mean, if you go to any section, the graphic novel section, and now they're teaching science and history and everything, biography, everything through graphic novels.
Wow.
And I think that's because they get so much more from it. And you've got the reluctant readers. Also, English as a second language learners
That's
They're
true.
grieving.
That's a good
They
point.
can't read all the teen grief books. So anyway.
That's an interesting point. Well, and while we're on that point, have you thought about making a Spanish language version of your book?
No, I have not. Because any Spanish speaker could completely understand this book.
True.
But I will consider it in the future. But honestly, I did make it so that all my clients who cannot, not all my clients, but some of my clients who cannot read a word could understand this whole story. What it was like when Corey was alive, what it was like when he was in the hospital. The journaling even has doodles, so they don't have to read what the journaling says. And also, if anyone has read it to them once, they'll remember that, and then they can read the pictures.
Sure.
And then at the end, what happens?
Yeah. Well, and so the kind of the story in the book involves I think the teenager's name is Sam, a friend of Corey, and is struggling with the loss of their friend. And the book kind of opens with that, I think, and goes through what Sam learns about dealing with grief, and including goes to a grief camp.
Yes, he goes through a grief camp, which is a real camp across the whole United States, and it's free. And I didn't know this free resource was out there. It's called Camp Aaron. I talked with people from Camp Aaron. I got their permission to use it in the book. That's why you see the little trademark symbol, even drawn in the journal, right above Camp Aaron. It is real. And there are kids, like thousands of kids who just went to Camp Aaron. It's usually in the summertime because it's literally an outdoor camp all across the country. It was started by Jamie Moyer, who was a pitcher for the Mariners here in Seattle. Because of a girl named Erin who was in a Seattle hospital, and she was worried about her siblings and friends and how they would get by when she passed away because she knew she was terminal. And that's how they started it. And so my character, hears about it and is like, grief camp, that sounds like a blast. And then they end up going to the grief camp. I don't want to blow the, what do the kids call it? Spoiler alert. They go to the grief camp. And anyway, so there are basically some coping strategies in here. Even the journal itself is recommended by that Hamilton Academy that you've shared the links for.
Oh, Hamilton's Academy of Grief and Loss.
Yeah, it's a good way to help us through this. Anyway.
Well, and for people who haven't heard about grief camp, I think in the book, Sam says, like, what are they going to be? Crying canoes, and I forget what the other thing was, like sad archery. Angry archery. Right.
Crying canoes, and there was a third one. Yeah,
and then I think Sam finds out that no, actually it was pretty cool.
Yeah, because there actually was archery. Oh, sad stories around the fire.
There might have been some of those, but it's Camp Aaron is a really cool thing. And the funny thing is, well, I don't know if it's funny or not, but anyway, when my husband was sick in the hospital and terminally ill, and it was summertime during some of that time, and the Mariners were on. So we're trying to kill time in the hospital. We're watching baseball games every single day because you can kill a lot of time watching a baseball game. Jamie Moyer and Karen Phelps Moyer were being honored for the founding of Camp Aaron. It was like the Mariners were doing it. He had retired from playing at that point, I think, and they were honoring him coming back. And they did a community segment in the thing, about honoring them for the work they'd done with grieving kids. And I'm sitting there in the hospital next to my husband who's dying. And I'm like, oh my God, I need to take notes. I need to write this down. Like, wait, there's a camp for grieving kids. Like, huh? Like, I don't know what this is, but someday I'm going to need to know about this.
Yep.
So that's kind of the crazy thing. And
that
actually,
is, yeah.
I've interviewed Karen Phelps Moyer since then. And also the people from Camp Aaron, from Illuna Foundation, or Illuna Network.
Illuna Network, yeah.
So, yeah, well, I'll put links in the show notes to Camp Aaron and to Illuna because I think there's some really good resources there. It sounds like you've connected with them and had some good discussions.
I did. I connected with Sarah. She actually sent me like a list of, because they do more than just the camp. Like they find you local resources for your kids, whether it'll end up being like probably a weekly therapy type thing. All the organizations. So based on my zip code, and she can do this nationwide. I think it's illunanetwork.org, like resources. So based on my zip code, she sent me a whole email listing all the agencies around me that we could take advantage of for free if we need grief help. So I'm going to take that with me to talks I do, because I was thinking kids might be upset if they come to these talks, and they might need, grief resources. So yeah, it's kind of nice to know, because it's basically personalized for your zip code and your age and everything. The camp, I think, is for age 6 to 17-year-olds.
Something like that. And if you have older kids, college age and stuff, I think they can be a counselor at it, which I think would be a really interesting and also worthwhile, both to help younger kids and to kind of come full circle and be on that side of things if you're a grieving teen yourself or a grown-up grieving kid.
Yeah.
Cool. So I was thinking about, you were talking about speech language pathology and the language aspect of that. And I know you've mentioned some things about how important it is to use plain language, saying that somebody died, for example, as opposed to using all those euphemisms, they passed away or they went to sleep or something, or who knows what, all those things we hear. Are there other tips that you might like to share with us about for parents, widowed parents speaking with their grieving kids that can help them think about that?
I think the main one would be to hang back and not say much, especially any kind of a judgment word. That's pretty much the quickest way to shut down a teenager that I've seen, because I have an 18 and a 20-year-old, and I have friends who have teenagers, and we want them to feel willing to share what they're feeling. And I think at this time, they're going to be the most reluctant to, a lot of them. So even no matter even if they aren't reluctant, what I learned in therapy, just repeat back what you're hearing, and then let them keep going on and on. I feel like that would be the best way to talk to them. If they have questions, you can try to answer, but I don't know is likely is going to be the answer. And I would say also don't make promises you can't keep, because I imagine in a situation like you had where now you're the surviving parent, they probably want some reassurance that nothing's going to happen to you, but you really can't promise that.
That's a good point. And you're right. I think that is a very common, depending on the kid and their personality and maybe how much anxiety they have and different things, right? That kid might be desperate to hear maybe the surviving parent promise, I'm not going to die. And like you say, you can't promise that. What you can do is tell them that you're planning on being around for decades to come, that, share, like I've made a point of saying, hey, I'm getting my mammogram today because I want to make sure that I'm staying on top of my health, right? Like sharing the kind of things like that you're doing to the things that you can control to stay healthy, right? And I do think it's important to share those kind of things.
Sometimes and I'm not a mental health counselor, so I don't know, but sometimes I even think, especially with our older, like high school kids, and I'm used to dealing with high school kids with special needs, and I don't talk to them about this kind of detailed stuff, but sometimes I feel like going ahead with the what if, okay, I can't control what may happen to me today. I really cannot. I'm not guaranteed today. And I know how awful that is, but I'm not. So I have a plan. Here's what it is. Your Aunt Barb will take care of you. I don't know if she'll move in this house or you'll move over to her house, but like there are people around you who won't let you, I don't know, shrivel up or whatever you think might happen. So go ahead and maybe actually talk about that, because I feel like they need the honesty. And as soon as they hear an adult saying, I'll be fine, don't worry. They're like, oh God, I can't trust them because there's no way they can promise me that.
Right. Well, you're right. Kids are smart, and teenagers especially are smart, right? And they can detect, right, that you're lying or you're fibbing or whatever. No, you're right.
It's worth talking about. You can even say, I want to tell you I'll be fine, and I'm intending to be here for sure. But and especially if you have a child or an adult on the autism spectrum, they know reality. Like they don't they don't even know how to be fake. They don't know how to lie. So they'll be like, you can't promise me that. You could die today. Like they're literally like,
and they're not wrong, like, right? Yeah.
So
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I have heard mental health professionals talk about that. And I think it depends a little bit on the kid too. I do think for most kids, it is considered helpful for them to understand you know, here is the plan. If something, you know, I'm not planning anything happening to me, it's very unlikely to happen. If it did, there is a plan and there's comfort in knowing, right, who will take care of them. Yeah. Right. And they will have a place to live. They will have someone to look after them. They can, you know, have, I don't know, the money from your house will get sold and they can go to college or whatever it is, right? Sometimes I think, and this is where if someone is struggling with this, you know, reaching out to a grief counselor or mental health expert, I think if a kid has trauma, sometimes it's like even talking about that plan might be triggering.
But if they bring it up, I'm kind of feeling like if they bring it up, like I wouldn't just bring it up because maybe they weren't even worrying about that. No. I'm just saying you're listening to them. They're coming to, that's why you have to listen to them. Step one, like what is he saying to me? Like if he's just like talking about great memories, okay, yep, great memories. We're going on that line. I mean, I'm only going to like almost like a mirror, right? I'm going to respond based on what you're asking me for. So yeah, you don't have to talk about, I'm talking about the kid who asks.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Yeah. Sure.
That's why, step one, man, we have to totally listen and even just be quiet. Like even a lot of, because I do that in therapy because I don't know what to say. I'll just go, and I just wait and I wait and the kid will say something.
Right. So, tell me more about that.
And what helps too is if you're doing something at the time, like if we're building Legos or we're drawing, they just start talking more.
Yeah. Or driving where you're sitting next to each other, both looking out the window.
Yeah.
That's another good one. Good. Okay. All right. Well, that's helpful. Thank you. What else haven't we covered here that you'd like to share with us about the book or about what you learned in the process of writing it?
Here's something I wrote up as I prepared, that kids love having someone listen to their ideas and even take off on their ideas. So sometimes I'll start drawing what the kid is saying, no matter what they're talking about. It doesn't have to be grief, but whatever they're talking about, like, you know, I went to school, I'll start drawing a school and then they'll add a drawing to it, or they'll tell me what to draw. And then somehow, you know, more comes out, and then it could become a story if we wanted it to, you know, the whole narrative teaching, there's got to be a problem and how do we solve it? Or what are the attempts we do and were they successful? Or we could be playing with like the pirate ship and then they do something goofy. And rather than me correct them and be like, okay, this is how you're supposed to play pirate ship. You know, there's this little treasure and we have to go find it. If they do something goofy, then I just go with it and I do that weird goofy thing. And then we just keep going. So, anyway, that could be helpful.
Yeah, that sounds neat.
The other, I do have two quotes. Oh, I don't want to stop you though.
Oh, no, please, yes.
Two quotes about writing books, because this is my first one ever. I've never written a book, and I was only moved to do this when I couldn't accept that he was gone. And these guys needed something, I felt like, that didn't exist. So I went ahead and wrote it. But as I was doing that, I came across quotes about writing books that seemed to fit with what I believe. And this one is from Jean Carl, From Childhood to Childhood. It says, a good book respects a child's intelligence, his pride, his dignity, and most of all, his individuality and his capacity to become. So that's actually what I do in therapy, basically. No matter what that child's intelligent, like what they can think about, like if all they can think about is Santa Claus, then that is all we talk about, all we do, and it'll just grow from there. They do have intelligence. It's just, it may not be the way we assign it to second grade, but they have intelligence. I mean, that guy knew everything about Santa Claus. Like, you know? So
yeah.
It's like what floats their boat, you know?
Right. And I can see how the book, the way you've written it, is open enough for different kids' experiences and interests, and you're not prescribing like this is what you have to do or think, or this is how you have to process it. But it's very, I think kids, teenagers can read into it their own experiences and take from it what they need to and what will be helpful for them.
Yeah. Good. That was Yeah, that was
that
my
was
goal.
the idea, right?
Yeah, for sure. In fact, I was like, I don't want to tie this up with a neat bow,
Yeah.
silver lining it, because it sucks. It
Yeah.
literally sucks. That's really all. I just
Right.
wanted the book to be like, it sucks, and I get it.
Right. Which, is a lot of what people, it's validating, right? To say, I'm not the only person who feels this way. When I lost this parent or this sibling or this friend, it sucks. Yeah. And it doesn't all have to be tied up in a neat bow and okay somehow.
Right. I just didn't want them to feel so alone, because I actually heard from someone who lost her best friend in high school. After I had written the book, she was telling me about it because she looked over the book for me, and she was like, oh my gosh, this is right on. And she's like, I was a happy, great person, and then this happened, and then I just shut down. I felt completely alone. I went to the library. I couldn't find any books that applied to my situation.
Yeah.
And she's had a tough time.
Yeah.
She actually had 2 other friends die in high school after that.
Wow.
And that was here in the area. And so I was just like, oh.
Wow. And this is someone who's an adult now, or?
Yeah. And she helped me, she was a reviewer. She looked over the book. And, yeah.
Good. Well, and I think it's an important point that a lot of grieving teenagers do feel alone. And, and in my case, it's people who lost a parent. They might not have any other kids in their school, or at least among the people they know in their school, who have a dead mom or a dead dad. And they do feel alone, and they feel like the other kids don't get it. And even maybe they're trying to be nice, but they don't, there's, they don't, their parents are still alive. They just don't get it on that level,
Right.
And so something like this, where I think a minute ago you said one of your goals was for the teens not to feel alone. And I think that's an important thing that books can help with. And in my case, a lot of it is memoirs, right? I know a lot of people like to read memoirs and they feel less alone hearing other people's stories. And you've done something like that, but in a more accessible format of this graphic novel format.
Right. It's like a short mini memoir, and it is my memoir, but it's completely fictionalized because, they don't want to hear about a 55-year-old lady who's sad because her friend's son died. So, and we made Corey be 18 in the book so that high schoolers could relate, because we thought they saw that he was 23. They'd be like, oh, he was, older. Of course he died. Right. Well, no, he was young and died, and he was your age. And so, yeah. And I found this article about graphic memoirs. That's exactly what she said. She loves reading that. Not graphic memoirs. Oh, no, it is graphic memoirs. There's actually a whole bunch of them.
Oh, wow.
It says, I like to see how they handle their problems and what they think and feel and value. Getting information through images is always more immediate and memorable. And memoirs show her that the world is full of things that you're familiar with, but also things that you're not familiar with. And that they help you deal through the pages of the book. We know that the person who wrote it is all right because they were able to write this book. So it's like, hopeful. Okay, they made it. They were even able to write a book. So everything's going to be fine.
Yeah. You've got me thinking here. This is, I probably better not start thinking of these other ideas. I'm just wondering what it would take to turn my memoir into a graphic memoir. That sounds like a pretty big project.
Oh, I think it'd be great. Because then people could relate. And that's back to like the book you were saying, like your kids, and they're the only one in the classroom who had lost a parent. Well, or with a dead parent, sorry. If this book were in their classroom and all their peers had read it or seen it, and it's so quick, it could be read in like 5 minutes. At least there would be somewhat of an understanding, and because there's suggestions there's a couple index cards of things to do and things not to do, like a thumbs up and thumbs down. Like you wouldn't want to say he's in a better place, get over it, all that. So, and the things to do is like mention the person's name and remember stories of them. So it'd be helpful for the whole class to have read that when your kids came back to school.
Sure. Lots of good ideas for you here as you can spread the word about your book. Good. All right. Well, before we wrap up here, I think you also have a free study guide or something like that on your website that goes along with the book. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. It was, as I work with kids, they're struggling in school usually. Their reading comprehension is usually really poor. And the main reason is they don't make a movie of what they've read, and they don't make inferences. And so as I wrote this book, I kind of made notes of where a kid would have to make some inferences, or what would be a good writing prompt. They're high schoolers or middle schoolers, probably have to write paragraphs, essays, so some of those prompt ideas are in the study guide. There's also a letter in here that I got from ilunanetwork.org, the goodbye letter, and they said I could use it, and I could also, I've only put a few questions, but it's like, dear so-and-so, so you'd say the person who passed away, I want you to know that blank, what I miss most is blank. One thing you taught me is, I think if you were here now, you would tell me blank. And honestly, I don't remember what I put on the study guide, and I didn't know you were going to ask me about it. Sure, it's stuff.
Yeah. Well, I encourage people I'll put a link in the show notes, of course, to the to your website where that's right available there. And there's some.
Easy. It's my name, Chris Buchanan.xyz.
.xyz. There you go.
.coms were very expensive, so I thought, I'll go with the learning, writing, XYZ.
Yeah, there you go. Cool. Well, good. Yeah, as I recall, the study guide has some prompts and some guides for the parent or the teacher to kind of think about maybe having some discussion with the teen, and ways to kind of dig a little deeper on some of this stuff. So thank you for putting that together, and we'll be sure to share a link to that. Okay, good. Well, I do think we're reaching the end of our time today here. I always like to ask a wrap-up question, if you don't mind here. If you could say one thing to parents of grieving kids and grieving teens, what would you say to them?
I think it would be pretty much the honesty. I guess it would start with the listening. So make sure to be quiet, provide times where you can, let them open up, whether it's drawing, talk, Legos, I don't know, gaming, car, whatever. Listen, and then be concrete and clear and simple. Every time you catch yourself using like grown-up talk, like fancy words, just stop. Even the word upset, what does that really mean? Upset. So, and when I actually have seen mental health counselors, and they say, as a client, and they say, are you mad, sad, scared, or happy? Let's just boil it down to that. Frustrated is a little vague. I'm mad. What am I mad about? Just keep it completely clear.
Okay. All right. Great. Well, I think that's a great place to end. So my guest today is Chris Buchanan, author of the brand new graphic novel, which is just out now, and it's called R.I.P. Corey, My Friend Died, and It Sucks. So Chris, where can listeners find you and find your book?
chrisbuchanan.xyz, and Buchanan is Buchanan. It's also on Amazon. It should be on bookshop.org soon. So that's pretty much it. That covers it. My website and Amazon. And then I have links for Facebook and all LinkedIn and all that right at the header of my website.
Okay. That sounds great. Thank you. All right. Well, Chris, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, Jenny.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Chris Buchanan as much as I did. You can find show notes and all the links at widowedparentpodcast.com. Look for episode 140. And if you're finding the Widowed Parent Podcast helpful, please consider supporting the show. It's easy. Just go to buymeacoffee.com/widowedparent. That's buymeacoffee.com/widowedparent. As always, thank you for listening. And until next week, remember, you've got this.
Thank you for listening to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk. Connect with us on social media and at widowedparentpodcast.com.